us, don't let it fade.
Welcome to Liberty Monday with Monday. As we continue our journey through the Declaration of Independence, we now arrive at the 7th and 8th of the 27 grievances. These two grievances are closely linked and deal with one of the founders' deepest fears, the misuse of military power in a free society. The founders understood history well. They knew that liberty often dies not at the hands of foreign enemies, but when standing armies are turned inward and placed above civilian authority. Context: why the military question was so serious. In the 18th century, standing armies were widely viewed as instruments of oppression rather than protection. European monarchs routinely used professional armies to enforce compliance, suppress dissent, and intimidate populations. The American colonists believed armies should exist only when necessary. Civilian government must always remain supreme. Military power must never operate independently of the people. Grievances 7 and 8 explain how the British Crown violated each of these principles. The seventh grievance: standing armies in times of peace. The text of the grievance: He has kept among us, in times of peace, standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. What the founders were objecting to. This grievance condemns the presence of permanent military forces stationed in the colonies during peacetime, without approval from colonial legislatures. To the founders, this was not defensive policy. It was a warning sign of tyranny. Why standing armies were viewed as dangerous. Standing armies posed a threat because they normalized military presence among civilians, created an enforcement arm loyal to the crown rather than the people, could be used to intimidate or coerce rather than protect. The grievance makes clear that the problem was not merely the existence of troops, but the lack of consent. Consent of the legislatures matters. Colonial legislatures represented the will of the people. By bypassing them, the king ignored representative government, treated the colonies as occupied territory, removed local control over force and security. This violated the foundational principle that legitimate power flows upward from the people, not downward from authority. Why peacetime matters. The phrase "in times of peace" is deliberate. There was no declared war that justified permanent troop deployments, expanded military authority, suspension of normal civil order. This made the military presence feel less like protection and more like surveillance and control. The eighth grievance: the military above civil authority. The text of the grievance: He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. What this grievance means. This grievance accuses the king of attempting to place the military above civilian government, reversing the natural order of a free society. In a free system, civil authority directs the military. Laws govern force. The military serves the people. The crown sought to invert this relationship. Why civilian control is essential. Civilian control ensures that laws, not force, govern society. Military power is restrained by accountability. Armed force cannot dictate policy. By making the military independent of civil power, the crown undermined lawful governance itself. A deliberate shift of power. This was not accidental. The grievance states the king effected this change, meaning he intentionally pursued it. The founders recognized this as a consolidation of authority, a weakening of representative institutions, a precursor to authoritarian rule. When force replaces law, when military authority supersedes civil authority, rights become conditional, dissent becomes dangerous, obedience replaces consent. The founders saw this dynamic repeatedly throughout history and now in their own experience. How grievances 7 and 8 work together. These grievances form a paired warning. The crown stationed standing armies without consent. The crown elevated those armies above civil authority. Together, they describe a system where the people lose control of force, representatives lose authority, liberty becomes vulnerable to coercion. This was not a temporary measure. It was a structural threat to freedom. Why these grievances still matter today. These grievances remind us that liberty depends on clear boundaries between civil authority and military power, law and force, consent and control. They teach us that even well-armed societies must ensure that arms remain subject to the people and their laws. Freedom cannot survive where the military answers to power instead of principle. Grievances 7 and 8 explain why the founders believed independence was unavoidable. A government that keeps standing armies in times of peace and places them above civil authority cannot coexist with liberty. These were not speculative fears. They were documented experiences. And the Declaration preserves them not as history alone, but as a permanent warning. Thank you for watching. As always, stay informed, stay free.
Liberty calls us, don't let it